What is going on, everybody? Tanner Pfeiffer here with the NFL Rumors podcast, also owner of Pfeiffer Football and Tanner Pfeiffer NFL on Twitter, or I guess now it's called X. So got to get used to that still. We have a very special guest today, Gary Myers, who has been with us before. Just always an honor to have him here with us. And we're just going to be talking about the latest NFL news. And we're just super excited to have Gary here. It's always a pleasure.
Tanner, how you doing? And Mr. Rumors, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, Gary. It's always a privilege to have my favorite insider here.
Oh, thanks. And happy holidays to all your viewers and listeners.
And happy holidays. Thank you so much, Gary. So kind of fill us in on some, maybe the biggest questions, you get asked, or kind of just whatever you think the biggest headline is right now coming out of, you've focused a lot on New York, and your time in writing. So what are some of the biggest concerns for your New York teams, or the biggest questions you've been asked?
Well, I think the two biggest questions are, one with each team is Aaron Rodgers going to play this year? And I would say with each game the Jets losing, it diminishes the possibility of him coming back. I think it's crazy he's going to come back anyhow, or try to come back.
Yeah.
But as far as the future is concerned, I think it's much better that he take the rest of this year off and get himself ready for 2024. Realistically, the Jets are 4-7. If they win two of their next three, they're 6-8 when he would come back. And at that point, they're really a long shot to make the playoffs. They'd have to win their last three games and then, really hope that 9-8 would get them in. And I just don't think it's worth the risk of putting him back out there for, the reward, which would be, a long shot. Now, it'd be different if the Jets were winning and then you hand the baton to Rodgers around Christmas and let him try to do what this year was all about, which was winning the Super Bowl. But the Jets just couldn't do anything offensively the entire season. So
it's been horrible to watch. That's for sure.
It's brutal. It's just brutal.
I tweeted something. Sorry to interrupt you, Gary.
No, that's right.
I tweeted something and I said, I think this year's New York Jets it's either as bad or worse than watching last year's Denver Broncos.
And what do they have in common there, Tanner?
Yeah, and exactly. And I tweeted the one common denominator or common factor for both of those equations: offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a clear issue. And I think that Aaron Rodgers' success in Green Bay has shined over the flaws in that system. I really do.
Yeah, and people forget it was Matt LaFleur, who was calling the plays in Green Bay. It wasn't Nate Hackett. Hackett was the offensive coordinator, and he worked on the game plan every week with Rodgers, but it was LaFleur who was calling the plays. So then Hackett's out on his own in Denver last year. He's calling the plays for most of the season, and it was just a disaster. As far as the Giants, it's who is the quarterback next year?
It's a
at
big
the beginning
question.
of the season, if he's healthy, it'll be Daniel Jones. But I certainly think there's a good chance the Giants will take a quarterback, if not in the first round, because they're kind of playing themselves out of that top tier right now. But I think it's a deep quarterback draft, and they potentially, because they have 2 second-round picks, they might use one on a quarterback in the second round. People get so fixated on the top of the draft, and if you don't get a quarterback in the top 5, it just isn't going to work. Just look at some of these drafts where the first 2 picks were Andrew Luck and RG3. Both of them, long gone from the league. Ryan Tannehill was the next quarterback taken.
Yep.
And he's a backup. And next one was Russell Wilson, who's had the best career out of all of them, despite what happened last year in Denver. So, Jalen Hurts was a second-round pick. Drew Brees was a second-round pick. So you don't have to take one at the top. Is it chance of success better? Well, yeah. These are the guys with the highest rated guys coming out of college. But
yeah,
it doesn't always work out that way, that they're the ones that have the most success. So I think the Giants' plan for next year will be Daniel Jones will play whenever he's healthy. And if they take a quarterback high in the draft, it'll be basically a redshirt year for them. Unless Jones is not ready to start next season, then you might have to play the rookie or the newest cult hero in New York, who's Tommy DeVito. Fans are just absolutely crazy about him. An Italian kid from New Jersey um, that has just galvanized the fan base. I mean, it's kind of fun in a bad season to see a pretty cool story come out of this.
Yeah,
So,
and
oh,
yeah,
go
and
ahead.
he mentioned there too, Tanner, Gary, that he had a chance to go to the Commanders, but decided to actually take less and go to the Giants, his hometown.
Yeah, I heard that. Probably a good decision.
Hmm.
Um, Especially now, it seems like it's a great decision. But even at the time, Brian Dable has a really good reputation as a quarterback coach. And if nothing else, DeVito is going to be coached really well this year and improve, even if he stayed on the practice squad the whole year.
Yeah.
Now we know it, as it's turned out, that he's had an opportunity to play. And although the teams that he's beaten the last 2 weeks, Washington, New England, are two of the worst teams in the league, he has looked better from his previous start against Dallas, where the whole team was just horrible. Um, so the last 2 weeks, he's looked like an NFL quarterback that is just very raw, but he does look like an NFL quarterback, which is more than you can say than anything the Jets have put on the field this year, other than the first 4 plays of the season
I
before
still
Rodgers got hurt.
I find it unbelievable that the Jets didn't do more before the trade deadline as far as just veterans. Um, now,
Yeah,
I'm a huge
Tanner,
fan
who
of
do you
Tim
want them to
Boyle.
get? I mean, just don't tell me Josh Dobbs. I mean, come on.
No, I mean, I've I watched Josh Dobbs at Tennessee. I thought he
Yeah.
was good. I watched him when he was with the Steelers. I thought he was good, but I wouldn't have picked him as a veteran backup or someone that could, be replaceable as a starter and just plug and play and go like that. He's impressed. Um, but I was so surprised that the Jets didn't do something more. Like
Not
even
necessarily, Tanner, not necessarily at the trade deadline, but going into training camp.
going into training camp,
They
their
need an
quarterback room
offensive
was
line.
nothing.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Think of this scenario. Imagine that Joe Flacco starts for the Browns this weekend against the Rams and lights up the Rams defense. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but just imagine that it does. Joe Flacco is a two-time Jet. They could have had him back at any time they wanted,
I
including
said the same thing. I said, just
yeah,
re-sign Joe Flacco at this point. Like, he knows the team. He knows that he was there last year, right? So,
yeah,
like, come on. Like, I know it would be his first season with Nathaniel Hackett there, but it's Rob Saleh was there last year. So, I don't know. Like, at this point, it's a better veteran option. I mean, the dude's a Super Bowl champion. So,
yeah. I mean, it's slim pickings, granted, but I think somewhere in the offseason they could have done a much better job of trying to bring somebody in the event that their 39-year-old quarterback got hurt. And but part of that is political because Joe Douglas is still trying to rationalize and justify taking Zach Wilson second overall.
yeah.
And the Jets had said, this is pretty much going to be a redshirt year for Zach, and that was their intention. But it only lasted 4 plays, and then they take off the red shirt, and he's got to play, and it's just a repeat of what we saw last year, maybe even worse.
Hmm.
I think it's
To
maybe
give him
worse.
to give him a true red shirt year, they should have brought in a capable backup with the idea that at some point he was going to have to play because the likelihood of Rodgers making it through 17 games, wasn't very good. So really a bad decision by Joe Douglas right there.
I
Hmm.
think so. What do you think
Yeah.
about their offensive line? I don't think they were well prepared heading into the season.
Well, that goes back, I think, to the change in practice rules that came about in the 2011 CBA where now you almost need a note from the Players Association to have a padded practice. Long gone are the days of 2 days in pads in the morning and the afternoon. I mean, those Giant teams, and one I wrote about back there, the 86 Giants. I mean, Parcells used to go twice a day, 3-4 days in a row, or maybe have a single practice one day in between there. But that was a grind. And they were in pads at least once a week during the regular season. And now that's a rarity. I understand the principle behind that is you're trying to cut down on injuries, practice injuries, but there are certain positions in football that they need to have the contact during camp and to some degree during the week. And that's the offense and defensive lines. And I think that's a real big reason why you see real poor offensive line play by most teams the first month of the season. And then teams like the Jets, who just stink on the offensive line, it goes through the entire season. The Jets have had a lot of injuries. They've lost, AVT 2 years in a row in a game in Denver, and he's their best offensive lineman. And they've had, like 10 different combinations starting. I mean, it's just a mess.
And then Becton keeps getting hurt. I mean, he's just not really. He hasn't played a whole season, has he?
No, but the thing was, he had been pretty durable up until suffering the ankle injury a couple of weeks ago. I think he's missed maybe 2 games now. I'm not sure, but he had made it through all training camp and the first 2 months of the season. But you always worry about him because he's got the bad knee.
Yeah,
and you don't know when that's gonna cause a problem.
Yeah. What do you think Zach Wilson will just end up getting released or traded, Gary, after the season?
You have to find out how Aaron Rodgers feels about that because he's the de facto general manager of this team.
that's to me. That's the only reason Hackett has a job. That's the only reason they signed Alan Lazard to that deal. And I knew it coming out of Green Bay. I said, I do not want Lazard on the New York Jets. I like Lazard, but he's a 50-50 guy. Like he can catch the most contested thing ever, but he can drop a wide open pass.
Yeah, and the whole idea was that that Aaron Rodgers would bring out the best in him.
Yeah.
Now they did hire Hackett, a good month or 2 or 6 weeks or whatever prior to making the trade for Rodgers.
To kind of entice him, right?
Well, yeah, but if Rodgers decided to retire when he came out of the darkness retreat or Green Bay traded him somewhere else, then the Jets were stuck with Hackett. So I think the Jets probably knew all along they were going to get Rodgers, and then it was just a question of how much it was going to cost in draft picks to get him. But they've done everything this year to make Rodgers comfortable. He likes Robert Saleh. He loves Hackett. He loves Lazard. Randall Cobb is his best friend. They even brought in Billy Turner, an offensive lineman who's not very good. Now the issue really is what happens, as we project what the coaching staff will look like and the quarterback room will look like. I forgot, Tim Boyle is only here because of Rodgers also, and now he's starting. When they go to Rodgers and say, who do you want back? He's going to say he wants Hackett back and he wants Saleh back. And he'll probably say, let's just bring everybody back because these are the guys I want. And that's why everybody but Will of that group that I mentioned, everybody but Wilson was brought in because of Rodgers. And Wilson will probably, he really should get cut in the offseason. I mean, no disrespect to him or anything personal, but I think by this time the Jets know he can't play. It's a shame they wasted the second overall pick in the draft, but that stuff happens. Not often, but it does happen. There's really no reason to keep him around. They're not going to pick up the 5th-year option. They don't want to be in a position that he has to play next year. and then so he'll be a free agent after the 24 season. What's the purpose of keeping him around? You're not going to put, you don't want to put him back on the field, and you'll have to make a decision after the season whether you want to sign him to a contract, and you could just base that on what he does in practice. So I think Zach Wilson, and plus the fans just have had enough of him.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So
for sure.
I think, and sometimes you say a guy needs to change his scenery to succeed. I don't know if that's the case with him. I'm just
Mhm.
not sure he can play in this league.
Yeah, I got you. One of the questions I got for you, Gary, is about Bill Belichick. I know Bill Belichick. There's a lot of rumors going around that they could be a split in New England after the season, and there are a lot of teams that could be interested in him, like the Chargers and the Panthers. So I'd like to hear your take on that.
Well, I think that the Chargers are the most likely. They have a really good roster, and they have
They
one of the
do.
best young quarterbacks in the league. Their defense is what needs to be fixed. You'd think that Brandon Staley, whose strength is defense, would have a better defensive group than he's had. So I would say that's the most likely. And you know, think of some of the other off the field uh, reasons that he might go there. The Chargers are the number 2 team in Los Angeles, and some people say they're even the number 3 team behind the Raiders. You know, obviously the Rams are first. The Chargers really need to energize their fan base. They need to get an identity. Um, Bringing in the guy who's considered the greatest coach in NFL history, I think would be a huge step in that direction. You know, my issue right now with Belichick, and I think any team that has an opportunity to sign him should do it or trade for him is what's going to happen. Um, how much that's happened in the post Brady years has diminished, you know, his marketability and the desire of teams to bring him in. That's why I don't necessarily think that Carolina is a good fit because he hasn't done a good job developing a quarterback since Brady, and that's 20 years ago. And do you trust him that he's going to be the one, and whoever his offensive coordinator is, which will either be Josh McDaniels or Bill O'Brien, and maybe he'll have both of them on his staff. They could be able to get Bryce Young headed in the right direction.
Remember
It
when
yeah,
Belichick did have technically 3 starting quarterbacks on his roster when it was Garoppolo, Brady, Jacoby Brissett. You know, so I think that like having Garoppolo go out and do what he did helped him as that, you know, I don't know, I don't want to say like quarterback developer, but you said it's been 20 years. I mean, technically it has. But like I still think, you know, with Belichick, he's had and Brady too had a top 10 defense like how many times out of the 20 years he played there, and I think that could transfer over to the Chargers, especially with that roster. I
yeah.
think it's
The
a
other
good.
team that I had mentioned a couple months ago, and I still think this is a possibility, is Dallas. That I know they're having a nice season, but it's going to be the same as last year. They'll be the number 1 wild card team. They'll win their first playoff game at the NFC South division champion, and then they'll go to San Francisco and they'll lose again.
Yeah.
Well, it's I mean, you can see it being a carbon copy of last year. And at what point is Jerry Jones, who's now like 81 or 82, going to say, you know, it's been what 1995, so we're at 28 years now without a.
28 years.
I mean, forget about getting to the Super Bowl or winning it. They haven't been past the divisional round since 1995. So will Jones say, "All right, you know, I'm going to do what I did with Parcells in 2003, and I'm going to bring in Belichick and you know just try to win right now." Not that he's not trying to win right now, but
No, I know.
Belichick is certainly a better coach than Mike McCarthy, and that's a team that is just ready to win. But you know they got blown out in San Francisco. They should have won in Philadelphia. They lost at Arizona. They've been dominant at home, but if you look at who they've played, They've lost to the two teams that are over 500, and they've beaten every team that's under 500 except Arizona. So are the Cowboys really that good? When they step up in class, they've been beaten. And it does appear that for them to get to the Super Bowl, they're going to have to go, forget about the first round, the wild card game. They're going to have to go through San Francisco and Philadelphia, which I would label, as very unlikely.
And you've got a head coach in McCarthy who, I mean, besides what the 2011 Super Bowl is notorious with, I want to say Aaron Rodgers for making championship games and losing them, going to like 5 or 6 NFC championships and dropping them all. And then that kind of transferred over with LaFleur. But McCarthy hasn't been to a Super Bowl. It's not like he's a multi-time Super Bowl champion. It's been over a decade.
And it didn't end well for him in Green Bay. And there was lots of stories about him and Rodgers not getting along. I think Mike McCarthy is a coach that can get you to this point. He can get you to the playoffs. He's proven that. He's in the playoffs almost every year. But does he have what it takes to get the most out of this team to pull a couple upsets in the playoffs? That's why, like, the Philadelphia victories the last 2 weeks were, and this was kind of underplayed a little bit, but they're huge, huge. Not only for the number 1 seed, but just to win the division. They still have to go to Dallas. So if the Cowboys were within a game and they're 2 games back, but if Philadelphia had lost at Kansas City or lost the other day to Buffalo, I mean, they could have easily lost both games or, at the very least, split them. So say they split them, then they'd only be a game ahead of the Cowboys. The Eagles still have to go to San Francisco and Dallas. So there's a good chance the Cowboys might have been able to catch them. But by Philadelphia winning those 2 games, they give themselves a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah.
I mean, Dallas can still catch them if the Eagles lose to the Niners and then they lose at Dallas. And I'm not sure what the tiebreakers are. But so that's still a possibility. But, having a 2-game lead this late in the season gives you a little bit of margin for error.
Yeah, and with the 49ers adding Chase Young, Randy Gregory to their defensive line, I think it'll be a tall task for Dallas if they make that game to go into San Francisco and win that game.
Well, I think it's going to be hard for anybody. I still think the 49ers are the best team in the league. They just went through that 3-week period where not a lot went right for them, and they missed a field goal, and I'm trying to remember the other games they lost, but I mean, in Cleveland, they missed that field goal. But they're explosive. I mean, as long as they can stay healthy, the quarterback is proven that last year was not a fluke. But the key guys to keep healthy, in addition to the quarterback, obviously, are McCaffrey and Debo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no team has 2 explosive players like that. And then, Brandon Ayuk got off to a great start this year. I think he's been a little quiet the last couple of weeks, but he's certainly a game breaker. And then Kittle's terrific, and their offensive line is certainly good enough. I think San Francisco can, and I thought they were going to win in Philadelphia last year in the championship game until Purdy got hurt pretty early, and then poor planning by Mike Shanahan having Josh Johnson as his backup, and then he got hurt, and McCaffrey wound up being the quarterback for a little bit. I mean, so that was a mess.
That was crazy to see, actually. That was actually insane.
Yeah. I know that everybody thinks Shanahan's this genius, and, they had been through, Garoppolo wasn't available, but when Garoppolo got hurt, they signed Josh Johnson. You got to do better than that.
Yeah.
Because you always have to go. Darnold. Yeah, and I think Sam Darnold is, we haven't seen him on the field, but I think that him practicing, a year out there with Shanahan, giving him the best coaching that he's ever had, I wouldn't be surprised in the least if Sam Darnold had a play that he would play very, very well. And I thought the Jets made a mistake years ago trading him and then drafting Zach Wilson.
Because you kind of, to me, you got the same output.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Darnold is better than Zach, and I thought making that doing that whole thing of trading Darnold and drafting Zach. My feeling at the time was you only do that if you have a generational talent. Like if you were getting Trevor Lawrence, that's one thing. Okay, you get rid of Sam Darnold, but you don't get rid of Sam Darnold to bring in Zach Wilson. When the Jets were sitting second, um, it was a good draft. They could have done exactly what Miami did with the third pick, was to trade back and then trade back up. They wound up with Jalen Waddle and the draft pick from the 49ers that they used to get Bradley Chubb. So they really made maximum use of that trade with the Niners, and they got a great receiver. Um, the Jets should have done something similar because Zach Wilson was not good enough to trade Darnold. And if you don't want to stay at 2, the Jets still had so many needs that they could have turned that into a cottage industry with that draft pick. And I know Joe Douglas has gotten a lot of praise. Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, he picked the 2 rookies of the year. Breece Hall was having a tremendous season last year until he tore his ACL. Jermaine Johnson, he got in the first round last year. So really 4 impact players in the first, 35 picks of the draft. So certainly he deserves a lot of credit for that, although they were kind of chalk picks considering the Jets' needs. But everything else he's done, he's very easy to pick apart. He hasn't solved the offensive line. He's an old offensive lineman. He hasn't fixed it. They had to bring in a 39-year-old quarterback because he blew the second pick in the draft on the quarterback.
Valid points.
Yeah, and he's been around here for like 4 years already, and look how quick the turnaround is in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez, don't even get me started. I'm so happy. I'm not even like a Texans fan, but I'm so happy to see them playing like this. It's really cool.
They came so close last week to send. I guess it would send them to overtime, right?
It was overtime, and then it's like 24-21.
Few inches away from the kick.
Oh, from sending it to overtime.
Yeah. Somebody, I don't know if this is right, but somebody told me they actually lined up for that field goal instead of 8 yards back. It was more like 9.5. I'm going to have to go back and look. There was somebody at the game had told me that it was even going through their head that they lined up a little bit too far back. So I'm curious whether that's right or not because
that would have made the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Gary, talk to us a little bit about your book. I want to hear all about the book. I mean, we got a special giveaway we're doing with the book today, with everybody tuning in and subscribing to the YouTube channel. But I want to hear all about this book. I've been looking at your tweets, all the book signings, and all the ex-players that you've been hosting there. I want to hear all about this book because I've read it and it's good.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I was excited about this book project straight through. When I came up with the idea, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
When I came up with the idea, and then when I was doing the interviews, I knew I had really good material. It's about the '86 Giants, but it's not a recount of the '86 season because that was done so many times after they won it. It's really about life after football, which I think is such a crucial topic for players of that generation who played in the '80s, who are now in their 50s and 60s. And so there's a lot of really compelling stories in here of what these guys are going through, the challenges, the mental health challenges, physical challenges, emotional, and in some cases, financial challenges. And instead of just making it, say, 300 pages of really depressing stories, because there are some really heartbreaking stories in this book, I balanced it off by writing about how this team became a real brotherhood in 1986, had each other's back on and off the field. And what makes this team really unique is that 37 years later, they still have each other's back. That if somebody has a problem, they call Harry Carson, who considers himself captain for life. He rounds up the troops, and whether a guy needs to go to a doctor's appointment or is having some mental health issues or financial issues, they come to the aid of each other. And that's a really heartwarming part of this book. in addition to Parcells, and this story was so good that I didn't want to save it for a later chapter. I have it right in the introduction how Parcells was loaned about $4 million total to 20 players who have approached him recently that they were in financial need. And he considers his obligation and responsibility to look out after these guys because they sacrifice so much for him. As I mentioned earlier, with all the 2 days that he put them through, he knows that took a toll on their body. And because the health insurance that retired players get is so insufficient, a lot of them have medical bills that they can't handle unless they were working for a company post-football that had a good health insurance plan. So, as long as the reason is legitimate, Bill has been happy to help these guys. And I think that's a really cool story in my book.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say your favorite story in the book is?
Well, I'd classify it 2 ways. As far as the most compelling story, let me put it in that category.
Okay.
It's certainly Mark Bavaro talking about his battle with long-term COVID, because that obviously that was so recent that I think it really hit home for a lot of people, and him talking about his suicidal thoughts because of what COVID did to him, making him paranoid and depression set in. He just wasn't feeling well. He had like a pharmacy on his kitchen table with pills that doctors had prescribed. I mean, that's definitely the best chapter in the book because it's an amazing story. It's really an amazing story. One of my probably my favorite story in the book on the lighthearted side was a bunch of players on Friday nights would go into the city, which, depending on the traffic, could be 20 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes. But on Friday nights, they would go from East Rutherford into the city. And then Saturday, there was always a 9:00 meeting. And then if it was a road game, they'd go right to the airport. And if it was a home game, they would get to go home for a little bit. And then they'd stay in a team hotel on Saturday night. But the key thing was they couldn't be late for Parcells' 9:00 meeting. So a bunch of them, after they did their bar hopping on Friday nights, instead of going home, there'd be a caravan of cars coming into the Giant Stadium parking lot at 4:00 in the morning. And these players would sleep in their cars in the parking lot. $50 a man, they'd pay clubhouse locker room attendants. Each kid would get $50 from a player, and they were each designated with players. They'd go out at 8:45 and knock on the windows of the cars and make sure all the players were up so they didn't miss the meeting. And they couldn't leave the car until the player got out. So you'd have these guys half asleep parading out of the parking lot, and there was a ramp that led down to the tunnel, to the walkway rather, that led to the Giants locker room. So you'd have, I don't know exactly how many, but certainly a parade of guys half asleep, 8:45 on a Saturday morning. In the winter, it was freezing. But they made sure they got to their meeting on time. So that was an example of how they had each other's back. And I really believe that it carried over to Sundays, that because these guys, okay, we're setting up this whole program here. So we're going to make sure nobody is late for this meeting, because then you get fined and maybe you get benched. So we're going to make sure everybody gets to the meeting on time. Well, on Sunday, because they trusted each other off the field, they learned to trust each other on the field. And football being the ultimate team sport, these guys have to play off each other, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and linebackers especially. So I had a lot of players tell me that how they took care of each other off the field. And there are other examples of that in the book, but how they took care of each other off the field really translated or transitioned into how they took care of each other every Sunday.
Great. Yeah. And guys, if you want to uh, get a free copy of this book, we're going to be giving it away. We're going to be giving away when we post our YouTube video. And Tanner's going to drop the link in there. If you not one of the lucky winner, you will show you where that you can buy this awesome book. This is a great book to talk about a great team with the Giants. And I'm telling you firsthand, it was a good book. Definitely, I think Gary does some awesome writing in all his books. I really like reading them, and it is something. If you're a Giant fan, it's a can't miss. You know what I mean? It's you got to go pick it up, and we hope a big Giant fan is a winner. I hate to be biased there, but I do hope a Giant fan does win the book. I don't hope I don't get too much hate on that. But overall, it's a great book, and we're gonna give that opportunity away. All you got to do is like the post that we'll post, the YouTube post, and make sure that you come in and follow the YouTube channel, subscribe, and and when we put that link in there, make sure you pick up that book because I promise you will not miss out. It'll be a great Christmas gift for a sports fan in your life, and and it'd be just a great time, a good read right in front of the fire as we get into some cold nights in the winter.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add to that is
Yeah.
You don't have to care one bit about the Giants to enjoy this book because it's really about that generation of players and what they're going through today. I just chose to write about the Giants because I live here in New York. I knew a lot of the players. It was a championship team. It was a more cohesive story, writing about one team than just talking to different players from different teams. As they would tie everything together. But this could really be about whatever your team was in 1986, whatever your favorite team is today. These problems that the Giants are going through are not unique just to them. Now, some of the individual circumstances, of course, are unique, but just as far as the health issues they're having, some of the financial issues they're having, it really could be about any team. So if you care about reading a lot of behind the scenes stuff on what these players, the challenges they've had in their post career life, like I said, you don't really have to care about the Giants, just really care about the subject matter.
Yeah, when I was reading the book, look, just a couple stories that like reminded me of other teams. Like you said, I totally agree with you. You don't have to love the Giants just to get into this book. I mean, it could be related to any team. I sat back and as I was reading, I thought about like Earl Campbell,
Mm-hmm.
and I also thought about Tony Dorsett.
Mm-hmm.
It was a couple people that I actually thought about when I read it. It could have easily you know, they
Yeah.
could have easily been in that situation.
One of the things that really inspired, it's funny you mentioned Campbell and Dorsett because one of the things that really did inspire me to write this book is I was at the Hall of Fame a few years ago, probably like 2019. I think it was the year Kevin Mawai got in.
Hmm.
And the day before the induction ceremony, um, all the Hall of Famers are on a stage at this high school that's basically attached to the stadium in Canton. And they do a program, and all the Hall of Famers are on the stage. And right in a row was Paul Hornig, Earl Campbell, Tony Dorsett, Gail Sayers. Um, there might have been, and Marcus Allen. Allen is in incredible physical condition. I already knew that Dorsett was having some mental health issues, not mental health issues, um, memory loss issues. I want to make that distinction clear. It was memory loss issues.
Yep.
Horning, I believe, was in a wheelchair. I think Earl Campbell was in a wheelchair. Gail Sayers had dementia. Um, and I don't know how soon after he passed away, but I just looked at these guys and going, wow, they weren't in good shape, except obviously for Marcus Allen, like I mentioned. And there was nothing about Dorsett's appearance that gave it away. He says, I know Tony really well. and I had interviewed him the year earlier for a book I did on the Cowboys, and it just struck me that some of these guys were really struggling, and it really motivated me. And all those guys were pretty much, except for Sayers, who was earlier in Hornick, pretty much from the same generation. So that really inspired me to start thinking about writing a book about life after football. And then it took me a while to decide, okay, how exactly am I going to attack this? And obviously, I decided to write about the '86 Giants.
Well,
That's
I'll tell
awesome.
you what. If anybody wants to read this book, you will not miss out. You will not regret it. And like we said, we're going to give away a free copy to a lucky listener. We so appreciate you, Gary, for coming on the show. You're always one of our favorite guests to come on, and we're really, really happy of everything that you told us today and everything that we got to talk about. Since you've been away, our NFL Rumors account has gained 60,000 followers.
Wow.
Yep. So we're very proud and very happy.
Congratulations. So you're
Thank-
up to 60,000 or you've just added 60,000?
We added 60,000. We're currently at 269,000.
Oh, good for you guys. So
Yep.
let's see, if every one of your subscribers buys my book, I can just retire.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. And we hope that happens.
That would be outstanding.
Yeah,
That's our goal too. Retire and just talk football. I mean, that's what we want to
and
do.
Tanner is doing a lot of good things, like during game day, for everybody to check out. He's doing a lot of videos that even some of the a lot of big people in sports are grabbing his videos, like Adam Schefter, and a lot of other people like Tom Pelissero
Uh-huh.
are grabbing a lot of his videos that he's doing. So definitely doing big things here, just like Gary's doing big things here with the book. And we're just glad to have Gary as part of the NFL Rumors family for sure.
Well, guys, I always like coming on with you. You guys do a great job. I'm so happy to hear that your following is it's really catching on, and you guys are doing it the right way, and keep it up.
Oh, we appreciate you, Gary, as always. We're going to make sure to plug you in on the website and make sure we try to get this video out there and see what we can do for you in your book, and just make sure everyone's story is heard, because it's wonderful. And as always, thank you for your time. It's really an honor.
Definitely.
Well,
When we give the book away, Gary, we'll let you know who we give it away and tag you in it, and that way that they can see what an awesome book it is. You can see who.
well, thanks, and to you and all your um, viewers and listeners. Everybody have a happy holiday and a happy New Year.
Thank
you, everybody. We're going to be playing this outro, and then we'll call it good.
Thanks, guys.